Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome into the show. Yet another episode of Crushing Fantasy Football. I am Bryce Lockridge, your host of the show, guys. Today, I am going to be giving you my top 25 wide receiver rankings for week one of the fantasy football season, and I am going to start with the first player on my list, and that is Cooper Kupp. Now, this guy led the league in every statistical category last year. I mean, there's not much to think about here. I don't care that he has a tough matchup against Buffalo. I don't even want to waste a whole lot of time talking about him. This guy led the league in yardage. Yards per route run, receptions, targets, red zone targets, touchdowns, overall fantasy points, everything last year. Okay? This guy's matchup proof. You're starting him week one. Next player on my list is going to be Justin Jefferson. Should be a high-scoring game against the Packers. This is a guy who saw 167 targets in 17 games last year, averaged almost 10 targets a game. In a role in his offense where he gets targeted downfield heavily, this is a guy who is a candidate to come out every year and be a top 20 player as far as his average depth of target. And on top of that, probably be one of the biggest target hogs in the league and see, top five numbers as far as just overall target and reception count. He has tremendous scoring upside because he himself makes the offense a very high-scoring offense. The Vikings also have a good run game, so this is a team that's going to put points on the board. Justin Jefferson has high-scoring upside, massive PPR upside as far as his overall reception total, one of the highest weekly ceilings in fantasy due to his awesome big playability. Should be a high-scoring game against the Packers. Justin Jefferson is an obvious start. Next player on my list is going to be Jamar Chase. Not a good game script type game for Jamar Chase. I mean, I think that the Bengals are going to beat the Steelers easily, so will they need to pass the ball downfield to Jamar Chase as much as they normally would? Probably not, but this is one of the best wide receivers in fantasy. He has hands down the highest weekly ceiling of any wide receiver in the league, so I'm starting him week one. He's my number 3 overall. Next player on my list is going to be Devontae Adams against the LA Chargers. This is going to be a very high-scoring game. It's going to be fun to watch. Devontae Adams won't have a 32% target share on this team like he did on the Packers last year because he has more target share competition, but he's going to be heavily targeted in the offense nonetheless. A 27% team target share would not surprise me whatsoever. All of the past 5 seasons, this is a guy who has finished as a top 10 red zone target in the NFL. He's probably going to be that again this year. I would be surprised if he was not a top 10 red zone target. So we know that teams, quarterbacks love to target Devontae Adams like crazy when they get into the red zone because of his tremendous one-on-one abilities and his contested catch abilities. This is one of the top red zone targets in the league. He's going to be peppered with targets all over the field this year, and what's going to be a very high-scoring offense. He's my number 4 this week. Number 5 is CeeDee Lamb. Now, this is a guy who is not going to have any target share competition to start the season. I mean, Michael Gallup isn't going to be playing. James Washington's out for a while. The Cowboys probably won't be able to run the ball successfully against Tampa. They're going to be having to pass the ball a lot to keep up. I would not be surprised if CeeDee Lamb had 14 or more targets in this game. I know that's a ridiculous thing to come in and predict for a wide receiver. I mean, 14-plus targets a game is not something that you see 14 targets in a game is not something you see very often, but in this week against the Buccaneers, I would be astonished if CeeDee Lamb saw less than 12 targets because they're going to have to pass early and often to keep up with the Bucs. I love the game script for CeeDee Lamb. I love the talent. I love the fast-paced offense. I love the role that he has in his offense, especially to start the season with no Michael Gallup on the field. He has massive upside and could be the wide receiver 1 on the week. He is my number 5 overall. Next player on my list, Stephon Diggs against the LA Rams. Should be a high-scoring game. If Diggs had another 1,500-yard season this year, I would not be surprised like he did in 2020. I see high touchdown numbers coming for Stephon Diggs. We're talking about a guy that gets targeted heavily in the red zone and what's going to be one of the most high-scoring offense, quite possibly the highest-scoring offense in the entire NFL this year with Josh Allen throwing in the ball. I love him against the Rams. Next player on my list is going to be Mike Evans against the Cowboys. Mike Evans is going to explode this week. I mean, he didn't explode against the Cowboys in week 1 last week, but that's because Godwin and Antonio Brown went off. No more Antonio Brown on the team. Godwin, we don't even know if he's playing this week. If he plays, he's probably not going to receive the normal amount of targets that he's going to get because, he's just hobbling his way back onto the field. So this should be all Mike Evans this week. We know that Tom Brady loves to sling the rock to Mike Evans. They have a very good connection. This dude has scored like 27 touchdowns in the past 2 years. He's faced all wide receivers in touchdowns over the past 2 seasons. And the scoring upside, the yardage upside, the overall reception count upside is all extremely high for this game. This should be a very high-scoring game. I love Mike Evans. Next on my list is Michael Pittman Jr. against Houston. I actually hate the game script for Michael Pittman Jr. In this game because I think it's going to be all Jonathan Taylor. They're just going to run all over the Texans who have absolutely no run defense whatsoever. They're probably going to have a lead from the get-go and keep it the whole game. So bad game script for Michael Pittman Jr., but good matchup, I guess, nonetheless, because, Houston can't stop anyone. Their defense is atrocious. Michael Pittman Jr. and Matt Ryan will be able to connect at will in this game if they decide to target Michael Pittman 8 or more times in this game. He does have a tremendously high weekly ceiling this week, so I definitely have to have him probably as, considering the fact that I go robust RB, he's my number 1 wide receiver in a couple leagues, and I'm starting him without hesitation against the Houston Texans. Next player on my list is Debo Samuel against Chicago. I think that San Francisco is going to murder Chicago. Debo's rushing upside is going to be down a little bit this year because of Trey Lance, but they're still going to use him as a running back. He's still going to see games where he has 10 plus targets. He is arguably the best run after catch wide receiver in the entire NFL. He was second in yards after the catch last year behind only Cooper Kupp. So this guy's lethal in the open field. He's going to be in my top 10 a lot of weeks this year. Next player on my list is going to be A.J. Brown. Now, we're going to have to see how A.J. Brown is utilized in this offense. I think there's a lot of question marks, but we know that he is an alpha male wide receiver who is able to beat pretty much anyone one-on-one from a sheer talent standpoint. In my personal opinion, he's a top 7 wide receiver in the NFL, but this is a game where I think Philly's going to run a lot. I mean, they murdered Detroit last year when they played them, and they ran the ball on like 75 to 80% of their plays. It was something crazy like that. So it could be very similar this year. I don't think the passing volume is going to be high for any receiver in this game. I think we are going to see Jalen Hurts run the ball. I think the running backs are going to get more volume than they're going to get in most weeks. So it's going to be a running back game. And the wide receivers just aren't going to see a whole lot of volume. But A.J. Brown's elite talent level going up against a bad defense, it's got to be good enough to be top 10, right? Next player on my list is going to be Keenan Allen against the Las Vegas Raiders. This should be a high-scoring shootout style type of game. I think that Keenan Allen's touchdown numbers are going to regress to the mean this year, and he's going to see way more touchdowns this season than he did last season. So the touchdown numbers should regress in a positive way. We know that he's the most reliable receiver for PPR formats that you could possibly have. This guy gets the ball in all the high-leverage third-down situations. He is Mr. Reliable. He is going to see 10-plus targets in a lot of games this year. This is going to be a high-scoring game where he has a good chance to get somewhere between 7, 8, or 9 receptions. So the PPR numbers are going to be awesome for Keenan Allen in this game. If he got in the end zone multiple times, I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever. And he has the opportunity to have a 100-yard game as well because the Chargers are going to have to pass a lot because it's going to be a high-scoring game against the Raiders. Vegas definitely has this as one of the highest-scoring games on the slate, and it's going to be fun to watch. Next player on my list is going to be Marquise Brown against Kansas City. Kansas City scores points at will. Even with no Tyreek Hill, it's still going to be a very good offense. Arizona is going to be having to pass a lot to keep up, meaning lots of downfield targets to Marquise Brown, who has very little target share competition to start the season. And let's not forget that Kyler Murray had some of the best deep ball efficiency. Actually, he had the best deep ball efficiency of any quarterback in the entire NFL last year. He's very good at throwing the deep ball. Him and Marquise Brown are going to have a very good deep ball connection this year. Marquise Brown feasts downfield because of his incredible speed. And so I think it's going to be very fun to watch this quarterback wide receiver connection this year. Next player on my list, Deontay Johnson against Cincinnati. Deontay Johnson has been the most targeted wide receiver in the NFL in the past 2 seasons. This guy gets absolutely peppered with targets. I think that Mitch Trubisky is definitely a quarterback upgrade from an old Big Ben. Obviously not from a prime Big Ben, but old Big Ben had nothing left. Mitchell Trubisky actually has the ability to throw the ball downfield. So Deontay Johnson's average depth of target should be able to go up a little bit this year because he has a quarterback that has more arm strength. And we know that he's going to see a ridiculous amount of targets. He's going to be targeted within the red zone. So the PPR numbers should be ridiculous all season long for Deontay Johnson. He's never going to be a guy you have on your bench. Next player on my list is going to be Tyreek Hill against New England. Now, we're banking on this guy's talent and big playability. It's a bet on talent. It's not really I don't really think that he's going to have a whole lot of matchups that I'm that excited about this year because I just don't trust Tua to get him the deep ball. Jalen Waddle's going to be siphoning a lot of his underneath targets. So, the scoring upside's down, everything. I talked about him in my bust video a couple of days ago. I really don't like him on the season, but until I see him just bust really hard 3, 4, 5 weeks in a row, I'm probably going to have him in my top 15 just because of the insane weekly ceiling that he still presents. I mean, he has the best big playability of any player in the NFL still. So on any given week, he's a candidate to take a 7-yard slant, 70 yards to the house. So due to his big playability, he's going to start the season in my top 15, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if he dropped in my weekly rankings as the season goes along due to a poor offensive situation. Next on my list is going to be DJ Moore. Okay, DJ Moore now has by far a better quarterback than he's ever had in his career. This is a guy who ran a route on 90% of his team's dropbacks last year. He's heavily utilized in his offense. With a healthy Christian McCaffrey, the overall efficiency of this offense is going to be very good. DJ Moore's touchdown upside is going to be higher than it's ever been in his entire career. His PPR upside is going to be higher than it's been in his ever been in his career because he is going to see a lot of targets in this offense. He has absolutely no target share competition. Robbie Anderson is not target share competition for DJ Moore, guys. DJ Moore is going to absolutely feast all season long. I'm excited to see what he could do with a good quarterback. Next on my list is T. Higgins. I think that T. Higgins might out-target Jamar Chase in this game because we're going to see more short intermediate routes and short intermediate passes in this game as opposed to downfield passes to Jamar Chase, because Cincinnati is going to beat Pittsburgh quite easily. So I don't think that it's going to be a shootout style game, meaning less deep targets to Jamar Chase. So T. Higgins could out-target Jamar Chase in this game. I think he's going to get good volume and have a decent chance to get in the end zone. So the PPR numbers should be good for T. Higgins. Next player on my list is going to be Mike Williams. We know that this guy gives you one of the highest weekly ceilings in fantasy. We saw it in weeks 1 through 5 last year. He was the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy through week 5 last year. Will he return to that form? It remains to be seen. I think that he certainly can. Last year against the Vegas Raiders in that game late in the season, he had one of his best fantasy performances. It was that game that went into overtime where Austin Eckler had 4 touchdowns, and it was just a high-scoring shootout style type game. Now, the Vegas Raiders offense is even more loaded, so I think that this has a very high likelihood of being a shootout, which favors big ceiling wide receivers like Mike Williams. Due to the ceiling that he possesses this week, I absolutely cannot have this guy on my bench. Next player on my list is going to be Courtland Sutton against the Seattle Seahawks. This is a guy who it's Courtland Sutton with Russell Wilson throwing on the ball. He has one of the highest weekly ceilings in fantasy. I just don't like the matchup this week. I think that Denver is going to beat Seattle quite easily, meaning more runs and less deep passes to Courtland Sutton. Next player on my list is going to be Terry McLaurin against Jacksonville. Terry McLaurin now has the best quarterback of his career in Carson Wentz, and we're going to see just how good this guy is. Everybody knows that I think that Terry McLaurin is one of the best most talented wide receivers, a top 5 most talented wide receiver in the NFL, world-class speed, size, power, route running ability. This guy's awesome. He's just never had a quarterback to throw him the ball. And even with bad quarterbacks, he's possessed a pretty high weekly ceiling. Now he's going to have the best floor ceiling combination of his entire career. I really like him this week against Jacksonville. Look for me to move Terry McLaurin up every week in my weekly rankings once we see how good he is with a quarterback that can throw the ball and actually has pretty good deep ball efficiency. Next player on my list is going to be Michael Thomas. This is way higher than anyone else is going to have Michael Thomas. He's one of my biggest breakout players this year. Funny to call him a breakout player considering that we've already seen him break fantasy football and be pretty much one of the best wide receivers in fantasy that we've ever seen. But, he's been down the last few years because of injuries. I haven't seen him go off in a few years just because he hasn't been on the field, so people don't trust him. But I actually like Jameis Winston throwing Michael Thomas the ball because we know that Jameis Winston is not afraid to air the ball out. Like, now that this wide receiver room actually has some talent with Chris Olave, Michael Thomas, and Jarvis Landry, Jameis Winston is going to have more of a green light to actually throw the ball down the field, whereas last year they ran a really slow-paced offense, but that was only because they had no receivers. Michael Thomas was hurt. They didn't have Chris Olave yet. So with a much more stacked wide receiver room, Jameis Winston will have the green light to throw the ball down the field, meaning a decent average depth of target for Michael Thomas. This is a player that we know can have the ceiling to be the best wide receiver in fantasy. If he actually stays healthy and on the field, he literally has the ceiling to be the wide receiver 1 in fantasy this year. But he's way down in everyone's ranking, including my own, because we've got to see him actually stay on the field for us to build our confidence back in Michael Thomas. But, I think that he's going to be good this year. I like the matchup against Atlanta. Atlanta doesn't have the best defense. I think that the Saints are going to move the ball at will in this game. Next player on my list is going to be Jalen Waddle against New England. Like I said, he's going to be siphoning all of Tyreek Hill's underneath targets this year. I actually like Jalen Waddle to have a significantly higher overall reception count than Tyreek Hill this year, but he doesn't possess as good a big play ability. And now, don't get me wrong, Jalen Waddle has some great run after the catch abilities. He has good big play ability of his own, but obviously he doesn't have as good a big play ability as Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill is the ultimate ceiling, big play wide receiver in fantasy. That hasn't changed. It's just that, I don't like the role in his offense, but Jalen Waddle should definitely catch more passes than Tyreek Hill this year. I like him against New England. I think that he's absolutely going to feast in this game. And like most games this week, I think he has a very high likelihood of seeing double-digit targets. Next player on my list is going to be Juju Smith-Schuster against Arizona. Juju's being slept on so much this year, guys. Like, look, if you look at this dude's average depth of target, his first 2 seasons, he was, right around like 9 to 10 yards per target on his average depth of target. And then when Big Ben started to suck and became unable to throw the ball down the field, his average depth of target plummeted to like 5.5 yards and then like 6.2 yards in his most recent season. Now, obviously, these were seasons where Juju was hurt, so it was a small sample size, but it was enough of a sample size to know that Big Ben simply couldn't throw the ball anymore. That's why Juju's average depth of target went down. And this is when the myth started to be formed that, hey, Juju only runs short routes, intermediate routes. This is absolutely not true. He ran deeper routes back when Big Ben could actually throw the ball. And now he has a quarterback that can throw the ball 70 yards. So look for him to return to form as far as his average depth of target this year. He's going to run deeper routes, meaning he has chunk playability. He's still going to eat underneath in his short intermediate routes. He's going to be by far targeted more than any other wide receiver on this team. The PPR upside is there. The scoring upside is going to be ridiculous being in a Kansas City offense. So I love Juju Smith-Schuster this season. I think he's being way slept on. Against Arizona, it's going to be a high-scoring game. Look for Juju Smith-Schuster to absolutely tear it up this week. Next player on my list is going to be Brandon Cooks against the Colts. This is going to be one of the most reliable receivers in fantasy just because he is the only receiver that Davis Mills has to throw the ball to. And so he's going to be one of the best, most safest floor plays in all of fantasy. I hate the ceiling because this offense is trash. I really don't expect Davis Mills to be very good this year. There's some people that think he has some promise. I don't think he does whatsoever. I don't think we're going to see a good season from Davis Mills. I think the Texans are going to be the worst team in the entire NFL. And due to that, I hate Brandon Cooks' ceiling, but I love his floor because he's going to see 10-plus targets almost every single week because how else is this team going to move the ball? Next player on my list is going to be Rashad Bateman, one of my potential breakout candidates for this year. Obviously he looked really good in college. We know that this guy has a lot of talent, but I don't consider him a true wide receiver one at an NFL level yet. I just don't. We're going to have to see how this guy evolves in the NFL. Now, with Lamar Jackson throwing him the ball this year and him being the wide receiver one and having, a potentially high, we know that this guy definitely has some potential as far as his overall talent. He has massive breakout potential this year. I mean, this dude could come out and he could end up being a top 15 wide receiver in fantasy, but we're going to have to see how it plays out. I don't want to get too excited about him yet. If you have a better wide receiver one or two, I would play them. But he's definitely already entering the season, at least as a flex consideration. You can definitely expect to play him at your flex and get some potentially huge weekly upside. The Jets are absolutely terrible. Rashad Bateman could have come out and have a huge week one. I like the ceiling, actually, so he's a top 30 player for me this week. Next player on my list is going to be Jerry Jeudy against Seattle. Jerry Jeudy is going to lead the Broncos in targets for wide receivers this year. He doesn't have nearly as good of big playability as Courtland Sutton, because Courtland Sutton's going to be lining up on the outside. We know that Russell Wilson has tremendous deep ball throwing abilities. That's why I'm going to have Courtland Sutton ranked ahead of Jerry Jeudy most weeks. But Jerry Jeudy is the wide receiver one on the depth chart, and he is going to receive the most overall targets this year, the most overall receptions. But we're going to have to see how he's utilized in the red zone and if he could produce big plays in this offense before we get too excited about him. And I think we can't rank him ahead of Courtland Sutton until we see that the big playability is there, until we see that he's going to be receiving a good amount of red zone targets. So I'm going to have him ahead of Courtland Sutton behind Courtland Sutton until further notice. Next player on my list is going to be Allen Robinson against Buffalo. I like Allen Robinson this year because, all the defensive attention is going to be on Cooper Kupp. You have to watch out for the field-stretching wide receiver in Van Jefferson. And, Allen Robinson is a beast. He's like a 6'4" jacked alpha male type wide receiver. He hasn't really produced I don't want to say he hasn't produced good fantasy numbers. His first two seasons, he did produce good fantasy numbers. In fact, he had 1,000 receiving yard seasons. Last year, he was absolutely terrible. But in fantasy, your role in an offense matters more sometimes than your actual talent. This guy's got plenty of talent. It's just that he didn't have the right offense last year. I mean, the Chicago Bears offense was absolutely terrible. He's now going to play in a significantly better offense where the defensive attention is focused elsewhere. I think he has some massive breakout potential this year. And in this game against Buffalo, it's going to be a high-scoring game. If there's any game this year where you want to start Allen Robinson, it's probably this week. Next player on my list is going to be Elijah Moore. He's going to be the clear-cut one wide receiver in the Jets offense. Playing against Baltimore, they're probably going to be playing from behind. They're probably going to have to chuck the ball to Elijah Moore early and often in order to keep up. Any wide receiver one in an offense has potential in fantasy, even if they're in a bad offense, because they're going to receive a ridiculous amount of volume. So I like Elijah Moore as a top 30 play this week. I have Amon-Ra St. Brown at my 28. Look, I think that Amon-Ra St. Brown broke out very much last season because of, there was no TJ Hawkinson. He was hurt. DeAndre Swift was injured. So all the other pass-catching hogs on this team were hurt. So I think that was a big reason for Amon-Ra St. Brown's success. But due to the success he had late in the season last year, he definitely earned an increased target share this year. He's going to be far and away the wide receiver one on the team. They're playing against Philly. They're probably going to be playing from behind, meaning they're going to have to target their wide receivers a lot, meaning Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to be targeted heavily in this game. If he didn't have a huge breakout game this week, I'd actually be surprised. I like him on the week due to the game script. So I think that Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to break out this week. He's in my top 30. Next player on my list is going to be DK Metcalf, one of the more talented wide receivers in this league, but we just aren't sure about this offense. I mean, I don't trust Geno Smith to get him the ball. I just don't trust this offense whatsoever. So due to a poor offense, I have him at my 29. Number 30 is going to be Gabe Davis. Gabe Davis obviously has a pretty high ceiling in this offense. Will he return to his late playoff form last year where he got 200 yards and 4 touchdowns? I highly doubt that. But, if he can come in and show to have that ridiculously high weekly ceiling, he's definitely worth starting at your flex to start the season. You could even maybe move him up into your wide receiver 2 slot, but we're going to have to see how he functions in this offense. I think that it's going to be a big-time bounce back for Stephon Diggs this year, but Gabe Davis is going to certainly have his games where he provides a tremendously high ceiling. There's no more Emmanuel Sanders in the offense, so this should bode very well for Gabe Davis. All right, guys, those are my top 30 for the week. I hope this video helped, and I will catch you later.